Hey everybody, it's Tim from Linessa Farm Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today. I hope everyone is doing well. As always, if you have questions, be sure to go ahead and type them in and let us know. KM, nice to see you. So we've got plenty of stuff to talk about tonight. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. We have a lot of individuals lined up that are going to be coming and talking to us starting next week. So we have Indiana Farm Bureau is going to be coming on. They're going to be talking to us about Farm Bureau in different communities across the United States, what they can do for us, how they can help us out. We have some show people. Aaron Jennings from West Texas will be joining us, talking to us about prepping for lambing, talking to us about show circuit, dorpers, and all kinds of other interesting stuff. We have Jeff Hunter, who is probably one of the biggest Poll Dorset raisers in the United States, will be joining us. He also is a owner of Hunter Nutrition, which is very, very well known throughout the industry. So Jeff will be joining us. And then we have, there's some new exciting stuff coming online. We had caught wind of this a while ago that there was going to be an actual app coming out for individuals that raise sheep and goats for your phone, which we were really excited about because we use our book. And so when we're out on pasture and we're doing things, we actually have a book out there that we're writing everything down with, and we're trying to track everything. There is actually a company that is coming out with an app. This app is going to be called Herd Help. And I have been fortunate enough to kind of catch wind of it and see some behind the scenes looks, and that will be coming out, I would suspect, relatively soon. And it is pretty awesome. So we're excited about that. And so we've asked them to come on as well and do an interview. So lots of exciting stuff. We have a new studio that's being put together. So I no longer have to have this lovely thing back here. We're going to upgrade a little bit more. So again, if you guys have any questions, let us know. Diane Schrader. Hi, Diane. Yeah, I was pretty excited about the app too, Cam. We agree. I'm actually kind of surprised that it's been this long that nobody's come up with an app yet. I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't think of it. That's kind of not inside my wheelhouse, but having an app that you can use on your cell phone when you're actually out working with your animals, doing your health records and stuff like that, that's going to be really cool. So I'm excited to talk with Herd Help about that and kind of see what that's all about and what it has to offer. So tonight I wanted to take some time to talk about genetics. I want to take some time to talk about why it matters, why it doesn't, and then, like I said, answer any questions that you guys have. I have been working out of the area for the past week, so we haven't had any videos go up. We'll have some videos go up this weekend. I've been commuting. I've been getting up at about 3 o'clock in the morning to drive to work and then drive back. So it's been interesting. So lots of things are going on. A lot of individuals. We've had a lot of really good questions. If you guys aren't on Linessa Farms Tack Box, I would advise you to hop on there. It's a really great place for you to ask questions and to get answers. And that reminds me, and so that's the other thing about the Tack Box. So Linessa Farms Tack Box is a group that's on Facebook. And with that being said, a couple weeks ago, we posted on there and we said, hey, if you posted a picture of your farm or whatever, we were going to award, I think I said 3 people with a free item from Foundation Feed. And I lied. I'm just going to give it to everybody. So Wendy Freeman, who else do we got here? Nathan McLean, Jim Cooley, Jacqueline Trullo, Joan Nunez, Shannon Elizabeth Robinson, Jennifer Harding, Jamie Spry Wilson, Scott Oleg. All of you, send us an email at customerservice at Foundation Feed or customerservice at linessafarms.com. And we will walk you through what you need to do to get your free item. So for those of you that aren't on the Tack box, just make sure you check it out, and we will get you guys some free stuff. Don't worry, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to get stuff. We are constantly giving stuff away. So just something for you guys to check out. If you need to email us, again, it's customer service at linessafarms.com or customer service at Foundation Feed. So um, selecting breeding stock. A lot of individuals are looking to get breeding stock right now. They're either looking to get rams or they're looking to get bucks. And I wanted to take some time tonight to talk with you about genetics and why genetics matter, what it means and what it doesn't mean, and why that is important. So what really got me thinking about this was at work. I deal with a lot of cardiology patients in my civilian job, and I do certain tests that test individuals for damage to the lining of their arteries and plaque in their arteries, things like that, through CAT scans. Um, and I will tell you this, and I'll make it quick. But I think it does pertain to what we're talking about tonight, and that is that lots and lots of things can damage the lining of your arteries. And us humans, high blood pressure, um, high cholesterol, stress, and the hormones released under stress, like cortisol, high blood sugar. All these things can damage these arteries, but the biggest one is genetics. Some people, it seems like they're predisposed to these issues, and other people just aren't. And patients don't like that very much. When I talk to patients and they're like, I do everything right. What do you mean I'm having problems? Because they come in and they're like, I'm healthy. I know I'm healthy. I eat right. I exercise. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't do this. I don't do that. And then I say, well, genetics plays a role in this as well. Unfortunately, same thing with cholesterol. Genetics plays a role in this as well, and that kind of angers people. And I understand it, because we like to think that we're in control of ourselves, right? Like, hey, if I make good choices, then I'm going to be rewarded by by my health. And we most definitely fall into this trap, and this is where I'm going. We most definitely fall into this trap when it comes to our animals. Um, you know, we think, well, if I just feed this animal right, and I take good care of them, and I do this and I do that, then they're going to grow and they're going to be healthy, and everything's going to be fine. And that's probably the wrong way to look at things. So what I would encourage you to do is, um, I want you to ultimately, first and foremost, you need to look at the genetics of any animal that you're buying, be it male or be it female. And you need to think of the genetics of that animal as kind of like the rules of the game. You can operate within that game however you want, but you have this parameter that's set. You have these rules that you have to follow. And those are those genetics. How big is this animal going to get? Genetics. How many babies is this animal going to be predisposed to having? Are they predisposed to twins? Are they predisposed to singles? Genetics. What's the length of this animal? What's the height? What's the eye color? What is its propensity to getting worms? What is its propensity to responding to coccidia? All of these things are genetics, and that's why it's really, really important that you spend the time getting what you need. I've said this before, is that you're not going to get a really cheap subpar buck and a really cheap subpar doe and breed them together and get something fantastic. Generally speaking, that's just not the way that it works. I am not telling you to go out and spend $10,000 on an animal. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm telling you to do is to look at this from a different perspective. Would I rather see you spend $600 on an animal? And I'm just throwing out numbers, so don't get hyperactive or anything. Would I rather see you spend $600 on an animal that works out really, really well, and you're going to have him breed for 10 years, or would I rather see you spend, $200 on a deal that's going to come back and bite you in the butt, and it's not going to work out for you? And that's where the culling and the keeping of the health records really comes in handy as well. So there's the homework part that you have to do beforehand, and this opens up some doors to some issues that we need to talk about. The homework that you need to do beforehand is, and I know we've been over this, but you really, really need to go to, ideally, you need to go to this farm that you're going to buy this livestock from and you need to do your due diligence there. You need to talk with them. You need to look at the overall health of the establishment. You need to get information about the animal that you're buying. You need to know how many. Was it a twin? Was it a single? How old is it? Has it bred before? Have they had any issues with the milk? Do they treat for coccidia? Do they treat for worms? Um, I see this all the time online where people, I saw last week two interesting things that I wanted to bring up tonight. First thing that I saw was somebody posted online and they said, um, goats for sale, so on and so forth. And then as like their bullet points, they said, never have been vaccinated, never been wormed. And I'm sure in their mind, they thought that that was like a selling point, right? They're like, hey, I've never had to vaccinate these individuals and I've never had a problem. And I've never had to worm them and I've never had a problem. That doesn't really tell you anything as a purchaser. It tells you that if your animal gets cut by something, there's a chance it's going to get tetanus. It tells you, hey, no animal is impervious to tetanus. It doesn't work that way. It's not like, some sheep get tetanus and some don't. Like if they're exposed to tetanus, they're going to get tetanus. Just like you, if you're exposed to tetanus, you're going to get tetanus. So that's not really a selling point. The other thing about worming, and we've been through this before, is there most definitely are certain animals that are more resistant to worms than others. Absolutely. But trying to figure out which ones those are can be difficult. So there is no such thing as worm resistance. There is a complete resistance to where they just won't get them. But there are certain ones that are going to get worms and are not. So again, this is why we say things like, I'm not going to buy from the sale barn. And the bad thing about the sale barn is that you just can't possibly know what you're going to get. You can't talk to the seller there. You can't get the health history on the animal. You're kind of you're rolling the dice and saying, what am I going to get? Am I going to bring home diseases? Am I going to bring home problems? And we hate for you to buy an animal and then turn around and have to call it. The problem with bringing these bad genetics into your farm is that it's going to drain you. It's going to drain you financially. It's going to drain you emotionally. You're going to have to constantly be on this animal. I'll use Coccidia Resistance as an example. If you get an animal that's really prone to Coccidia and they get it, you may very well clear them up. But they're probably going to get it again. And then you have to wonder, do I really want to breed this animal? I mean, that's the other huge issue, right? If you get an animal that's sickly, are you really going to breed this animal? Do you really want to add to the problem? And we see this a lot with bottle babies. That was the other thing that I saw last week. Somebody was online and they said, hey, I'm looking for a bottle baby. Whew, would you really do you really want to bring those genetics to your farm and start breeding it? I mean, we're ultimately going against what we said we want to do, right? We want to cull and we want to make things better. Why would you purposely bring in something that is problematic? They inherit these traits from their parents. Now who's to say why that bottle baby, why that happened? But the fact of the matter is we need to be extremely, extremely, extremely cautious when we're doing things like that. That's kind of going against what it is that we want to be doing. And so I tell people this: we get really, really hung up on the I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to shear. I don't want to trim hooves. I don't want to whatever. It's I don't want us. I don't want us. When I get customers that come on here, when I do consults with people, I hear a lot of the I don't want to. What you need to do and what you should do, and I don't care if you've been raising sheep and goats or just sheep or just goats or cattle or whatever. I don't care if you've been doing it for 10 years. If you're kind of finding yourself in a spot where you're like, I don't know where to go next. I don't know what my next move is as a farm or as an individual. Take a few minutes, sit down and make a list. And I want you to, instead of worrying about the things you don't want, I want you to write down the things that you do want. What do you want? What are you looking for? Are you looking for Meat size. Are you selling to customers for meat? Are you looking for something to show? Are you looking for something just as a pet? Are you looking for something that's going to grow really fast? Are you looking for something that's going, write down all these bullet points and then decide what it is that you want. Then make the determination what breed fits this category. Because you may go into this and say, well, I don't want a wool sheep. Like, I don't want a wool sheep. I don't want a wool sheep. But then you say, I want something that's going to show well, and I want something that's going to grow really fast, and I want this and I want that. So you've got all these points that basically go against it. At the end of the day, is it really worth it? Is it worth it to go into it and say, I don't want this? And let's be honest, some silly stuff like, I don't want to, you can fill in the blanks with a lot of these things. So make a list of what you do want. Don't worry about what you don't want. Make a list of what you do want. Find a breed that fits in there, and then start reaching out to individuals that raise that specific breed. I think that is a more mentally healthy way to go about doing this, and I think you're going to do yourself a lot of favors. So let's see what we've got. Oh, do you see much foot rot in sheep? Okay, so here we go. Hi, Brian. So Brian says, do you see much foot rot in sheep in their back feet, or is it more likely to be on their front? I've done my share of hoof treatment on the front feet, but never on the back. That's quite interesting, Brian. So with actual hoof rot, I see it equally on front and back feet. I would say that I probably historically have actually seen it more on the backs, because it seems like the backs tend to get overgrown faster than the fronts. It seems like, the fronts, they can rub them and chew them a little bit better, and the backs get overgrown. And when that hoof starts to curl around and things start getting impacted in there, that's when we see more problems than not. So, but I will tell you this: when I see scald, when I see mange and other things like that are affecting the feet, laminitis, things like that, I tend to see that more in the front. Why that is, I'm sure there's a good reason for that, but I don't know. So, I would say if you get an animal, and this is I think is good advice. If you get an animal, that's weird for me to say that. I think this is good advice. I think historically, this is what I've seen. If you see an animal that has gotten hoof rot on a foot, you need to keep your eyes open to make sure that they're either not starting to get hoof rot on another, or just kind of keep your eyes on them if they're going to start limping or something like that. If I see an animal that has a hoof issue, I go through and I actually look at all the feet. I don't just worry about that one. And this is a conversation that I have with my daughters all the time. Is if they have to lay their hands on an animal for any reason, whatsoever, I don't care if they've got a little piece of fuzz stuck to them or whatever. We do a health check when we look at them, because it's super easy and super fast. We already have them anyways, right? You've already gone through the trouble of getting them. So what do? Well, we look at the eyelids, we look at the nose, we look at the feet to see if anything's going on, because you got them, you might as well do it. And Lord forbid, if you get your hands on one and you want to, and you're checking one foot, you better just go ahead and check them all. And go ahead again, you're going to want to check inside that hoof there, and that's where you're going to start seeing problems before anything. And sometimes it's really buried down in there and you can't see it. You got to really, really look and see what's going on. Just check them all. There's kind of a misnomer out there that people think, well, oh, in order for me to have hoof rot, they need to be exposed to like wet, muddy, sloppy ground. No. While those things do lend themselves to scald and other problems, you can most definitely see hoof rot on animals that are out on pasture, that are on dry ground, and you can see that. So it's not just for those animals that are on wet, sloppy ground and things like that. So I would say you have about an even chance, and kind of take it from there and see how it goes, and keep us posted. It may just be a fluke that you've seen it in that way. So something to think about. All right, so let's see what we have here. Erica Ann, hello. I paid for a consultation with a YouTuber about sheep, and he told me not to feed grain because it makes the meat go bad and the hooves will grow, require trimming. What do you think? So I already know who this is. Not you, Erica, but I know who the person is that you got the consult from. So, um, grain is an additive that you can give or you cannot give. Um, and this is a really complicated question that we would really have to break it down. So the first thing is, um, to have somebody just tell you plain, like, don't feed grain. Um, Grain's right for some people and it's not for others. I just read an article by University of Maryland, small ruminants, and they said in their area, um, the farms that they had tested, 90% of them, the pastures were deficient in something that that animal needed, that the sheep or the goats needed. It was deficient in selenium, it was deficient in copper, it was deficient in this, it was deficient in that. So this Goldilocks situation where you're going to get everything that you need from your pasture is kind of a myth. It doesn't exist. So you have a couple of choices that you can make. You can determine if you want to feed them grain to supplement that, maybe some kind of medicated grain or medicated supplement, or you can make the choice to feed them just some kind of loose mineral that's medicated. All of these things are up to you depending on what it is that you want to do. We have been feeding grain to animals since Egyptians. Like, this is not a new thing, and a lot of times, a lot of these people are just ignorant, and I'm not calling names when I say that. I'm just saying, like, they don't know. Um, for whatever reason, they just don't know what they're talking about. So, if you have an animal that's on pasture, that pasture consists of protein, it consists of carbohydrates, just like that grain does. So, if I'm going to feed my animal a cereal grain like oats or rye or barley, it's the same oats or rye or barley that they're going to eat when they're out on pasture. They get legumes out on pasture, they get protein out on pasture, they get protein, they get all this stuff. And so people say, oh, well, if you feed grain, they're going to get fat. Well, why? Why is that? And a lot of this, they just simply don't understand the basics of biology. Like, go online and look up biology. There's a pathway for protein to turn into fatty acids, just the same as there is for carbohydrates to turn into fat. This is just the way things work. When our body takes in protein, or an animal's body takes in protein, it breaks that protein down into amino acids, and then it rebuilds that protein back up to make things. Certain grains are high in protein, certain grains are not. So, for example, soybean meal is about 40% protein, but it also has some carbohydrates in it. Alfalfa out on pasture can be upwards of almost 20% protein, but it also has starches and it has things like that. So animals can get fat. To make a blanket statement like, if you feed grain, they're going to get fat. Animals can get fat. You can feed them all the alfalfa they want. We go to farms all the time and see fat animals that don't get any grain. And we go to farms all the time that we see animals that are out on pasture and they look like they're dying. So for them to tell you not to feed grain because, oh, and then the meat going bad thing. So I already know who this is because I've seen him say it in another video. So, Erica, I'm sure you've bought beef at the supermarket before. I'm sure you've bought hog, so pork products, so pork chops, tenderloins, bacon, any of this stuff. You put it in the freezer. Again, look it up online. It'll last in the freezer. I know we put a hog in the freezer every year. It lasts us about a year. It hasn't rotted on me yet. I know this individual. I was referred to one of his videos, and he told people, he's like, if you feed your sheep grain, you better eat them right away because they're going to start to rot as soon as you kill them. That's just ignorant. And the individual has no clue what he's talking about. That doesn't even make logical sense. So, if somebody tells you something like that and it just sounds nutty, chances are it's just nutty. So, and you shouldn't be taking one person's word for anything. You shouldn't be taking the way I run things may not work for you. Some things may work for you and some things may not. The same thing with this other individual. Some things may work, some things may not. Um, but that's just kind of scary out there comments. So grain is right for some people, it's not for others. No, it is not going to make your meat go bad. A majority of the animals raised in the United States are fed some kind of grain supplement. It does add some fat and marbling to the meat, but as long as it's well controlled, you'll be absolutely fine. The hoof trimming thing is another one that I've heard this individual say. He says, "Well, if you feed them grain, you better start trimming their hoofs." So, for those of you females that are out there, or those of you guys that have had children, you'll know a lot of times when our spouses or our friends go on prenatal vitamins, they're like, "Man, my nails look awesome." Like it really makes your nails grow. If I were to, here's my argument about the nail thing. If I were to limit your intake of nutrition to the point that your nails no longer grow, we have a serious, serious problem going on. That should not be a selling point to feed our animals so their nails don't grow. Laminitis, which is an overgrowth of the nail bed, is a metabolic disorder that comes from like overfeeding these animals to the extreme that they get acidosis. So, having to trim your sheep and your goats' nails, that is a natural part of them. That is a natural growth process that happens. If someone's telling you that they don't ever have to trim the hooves on their animals, that should not be a selling point to you. That should be a point to you that tells you that that animal's probably not getting the nutrition that it needs. And again, just go there with me mentally. If I limit your nutrition to the point that your nails no longer grow, we can all agree that chances are something's not being done correctly. So again, I'm sorry that you spent money to consult with this individual. Unfortunately, a lot of people do, and a lot of people get kind of goofy advice. So just do your best. There's tons of free advice out there. There's tons and tons and tons of free stuff out there put out by universities and individuals out there. The YouTubers, we get paid by YouTube to make YouTube videos. Obviously, if you want like one-on-one consultation with me or someone else, that's going to take a half an hour or an hour. There's going to be a lot of us charge for that, but we offer a lot of advice on here. So I would say get as much free stuff as you can. Okay, moving on. Okie dokie. All right, Gabrielle. Hey, Tim. When you normally hear a wet cough, do you let them go through it for a couple of days or do you give antibiotics immediately? So this is a great question. So wet cough, generally when we hear wet cough, we think things like pneumonia, but the best thing that you can do, the best tool that you can have in your toolkit is a rectal thermometer. So we want you to take the rectal temperature of the animal. We want to see where they're at. And if they're running a fever, then it is definitely time to treat them with an antibiotic. If you've got a wet cough and you've got a fever, chances are you've got some kind of bacterial infection. And the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be on them. Lots and lots of effective drugs that you can use for pneumonia. Tetracycline based stuff like LA200. Nuflor works really good as well. Not so much the penicillin in that case. You're going to be better off using a broad spectrum antibiotic like LA200 or Nuflor, but your key right there is going to be the thermometer to check. There are vaccines out there for those of you, if you find that you're constantly getting pneumonia in your flock, either with your kids or your lambs, you can absolutely invest in pneumonia vaccine. We personally don't give it. A lot of this is you keep good airflow. That's important. Don't lock those animals up. Make sure that they've got good airflow. Make sure they've got clean water and got good nutrition. But it's not always avoidable. That's again, just being realistic when it comes to raising these animals. Is that back to the DNA again? Some animals are going to be healthier. Some animals are going to be more resistant. But there's just bugs that animals are going to get. They're just like us. You try the best that you can, you get the right amount of sleep that you can, you eat right, you exercise, you do all these things. And unfortunately, every once in a while you get a flu or you get a cold or you get something, and these animals are no different. So the thing is we want to act fast and we want to act appropriately. So check that temperature, go from there and see how things go for you. All right. Who do we have next? Hi, Brian. So, Brian, I purchased the mats that you shared on the tack box, also placed in front of their water trough, and they are terrified of them. They're tempted to walk across, but won't as of now. Sheep are can take a while to warm up to things. Um, a very interesting thing about sheep is if you have electric fencing, a lot of times you can take down the electric fencing. And they still won't walk across the line where the electric fence was. They're very habitual animals, and they don't like things that look different than they're used to. So what Brian is talking about is there's mats that they use these especially overseas, in Europe and places like that, and they will put them in the alleyways of their runs, and it's like a styrofoam type of mat that basically holds fluid. Some of them are long, and some of them are smaller, kind of like a mat that you would wipe your feet on. They also use these in the United States for bioenvironmental concerns when going in and out of like hog barns and things like that, where they have to disinfect their feet, where the workers have to disinfect their feet. So the benefit of these mats is that you can actually put liquid medication in them, and when the animal steps on them, it actually squishes that medication up and into their feet. And this would be kind of a hydraulic action. It actually pushes it up into the feet, and it works really, really well. The problem is that the animals can kind of get spooked by that. And you know how this goes. If you've had sheep or you've had goats before, you know that it's like they get it in their head that they don't want to do something, and it's like you're not going to get them to do it. So there's a couple different methods that you can use. Probably the easiest one that you can use is actually cover the mats in some straw. And we don't want you to cover the mats in straw so much that they're not getting any of it. But even with them stepping on that straw on top of the mat or that bedding on top of the mat, it's still going to get wet. And then that straw is going to basically absorb the stuff, and they're still going to get it in their feet. After a while, after they get used to doing that, you can kind of pull some of that straw away. But that's been something that we've had a couple different experiences with that. We have some individuals that they put out these mats and the animals stand on them and they have no problem. They put them in front of their waters, and the thought is they put the medication in it. When the animal walks up and they stand on it to drink water, um, it treats the hooves. Goats seem to tolerate this much, much better. Sheep seem to be scared of it. We know multiple individuals that have covered them with straw, just so that it doesn't look as out of place as it normally would, and they're fine. So I would say your best bet is to do that, is try some kind of camouflage, or make some kind of alleyway to where the only way they can get to it is to actually go and step on it. So not to give them any kind of choice. So try the straw thing, Brian. Let me know how it works, and if that doesn't work, then we can bump our heads together and see what we can come up with. Hopefully that helps you out. All right, what do we got? Jamie. Hi, Jamie. I have a boar buck. We've had him since he was 8 weeks old. He is now 3. I deworm him with Safeguard. I put Ultra Boss on his back, and I have not really had a problem until this year. I noticed he was losing hair even more, and his eyes were pink. He is still eating. So you may be dealing with some kind of a mineral deficiency. If you have the chance here, kind of let me know what you're giving them for a multi mineral. Chances are you may be dealing with a copper issue. We see problems with the hair. In the boars, and in, well, pretty much any goat. A couple things you'll notice when you're getting short on copper with the animals is you will get an off color to the hair. It'll lose its sheen. It'll get kind of a flat color. The other thing you'll notice is your blacks will turn more to browns. You'll experience hair loss, and then you'll also experience kind of a moon shape on the tail. We call it fishtail, to where they'll lose the hair off the tip of the tail, and you'll see it looks like a fishtail basically on the end of their tail. And that's a classic clinical sign that they're suffering from a copper deficiency. Now, that may be the case, and that may not be the case. If that is the case, if you're seeing any of those other signs, I'm going to say that you're more than likely dealing with some kind of a mineral deficiency, probably copper. And there's a couple ways that you can rectify this. If you're not already giving a mineral, a free choice mineral that has copper in it, you can start. The other thing you can do is you can talk to your local veterinarian about getting injectable medication to give to your goats to see if that will help them out as well. There are injectables that are out there now. Multimin 90. Multimin contains selenium, zinc, copper, and selenium, zinc, copper, and manganese, I believe. And you can inject that anytime you're going to be giving your animal injectable selenium or any kind of selenium. They also need to get vitamin E. If they're not getting vitamin E, they're not going to absorb that selenium appropriately. So if you're going to be giving a shot, or if you're going to be feeding selenium, we also advise that you add some vitamin E, or that you give them some vitamin E paste to help supplement them as well. Okay, so what if it's not that? What if you've got a goat that is, or a sheep for that matter, that maybe they're losing hair on their legs, maybe they look kind of mangy. You're noticing some periorbital swelling, some swelling around the eyes, little sores or little bumps, things like that. They could be dealing with mange, and mange is kind of a tricky little sucker. And the reason that mange is tricky that I've found, and this is just kind of anecdotal, like why do I think this is? I think this is because they can either be on the surface or they can be under the skin, depending on the time that you catch them. So what we do to treat mange on I've never seen, I don't know if I've seen mange on one of my sheep, but I've seen it on a goat leg. What we do and what we find is effective is we do an injectable and we also do a topical. So I like to use Silence, Cylence. It's a Bear product, I believe. It's a pour-on. So I like to use Silence as the pour-on, and then I like to give an injection of Dectomax. And this kind of works in two ways. One, it's going to kill anything that it comes in contact with that's actually on the skin. The other thing that it's going to do is any animal or any insect or bug that's actually biting them and sucking blood from them is going to get poisoned and die from that Dectomax. And that combination, the Dectomax and the Silence, seems to work really, really well. We had an individual here recently, this last spring. They had mange on a bunch of their goats, really, really bad. They did Dectomax and Silence, and then 2 weeks later, they did a follow-up of another injection of Dectomax, and it cleared them all up without any issues. So if I had to guess what you're dealing with, that's probably it. You're probably dealing with a combination of either nutritional deficit, or you also have some parasite issues going on. So check that out. Let us know kind of how things go, and we'll go from there. Josh. Hi, Josh. So is it a bad idea to graze straight alfalfa? I can graze them for free for 2 months this fall. Well, that's awesome. I would not turn my nose up at that. No, alfalfa is great. Alfalfa just requires a little bit of prep work on your part. And this is kind of going to be the same if you've got alfalfa or if you've got any other legume, such as clover. Clover is another issue as well that can cause bloat. Alfalfa can cause bloat. Bird's foot trefoil, not so much. That's kind of one of the protected legumes. But if we're talking about alfalfa, or if we're talking about a lot of clover, there's a couple things that I want you guys to keep in mind. Even if it's not just like, it doesn't have to be straight alfalfa, it doesn't have to be straight clover. If it's out there and you're going to turn them loose on it, there's kind of a little protocol that I think will benefit you, and a couple really easy things that you can do. So first and foremost, if you're going to be turning animals loose on a new pasture or on a fresh pasture or on something that's really high in these legumes, there's three things that you need. The first thing you need to do is you need to go on a veterinary website, Valley Vets or Amazon or something like that, and you need to get yourself a bottle of TheraBloat. And TheraBloat is a itty bitty bottle. It's only about this big, and it's going to cost you like $12 or something, and it's going to be expensive. But I always want you to keep a bottle of TheraBloat on hand. If you get an animal with abomasum bloat, to where they're bloating up really, really bad, that stuff will cure them right now. Like literally, we have given this to animals that were bloated, and within a matter of minutes, they are up and on their feet and going. Now that does raise other issues because, again, going back to genetics, what are these animals prone to? there will be some animals that are prone to bloating and there will be some animals that aren't. So again, genetics, genetics, genetics. When you're buying an animal, you want to ask the individual that you're buying the animal from, has this animal been on pasture? Or has this animal, what is it, have they been eating? That's very, very important. If you buy a club lamb or a club goat that's been shown and they've never seen a pasture in their life, and you bring them home and you throw them out on alfalfa or clover, the chances of them bloating may be higher, and you may not know what you're getting into and you may have problems. But I digress. So we've got our TheraBloat. The other thing is we never want to put our animals out on a new fresh pasture hungry. We always want to make sure that they've eaten before they go out there. So it's really, really important for you to consider this. If you're going to be turning your animals out on pasture, go ahead and give them some hay that morning. Go ahead and give them a little bit of grain that morning. Get their bellies full. Don't put them out there ravenous to where they're going to run out there and scarf down as much as they can, because the problem that you're going to run into with the clover, the problem that you're going to run into with the alfalfa is it's kind of hot. That is to say that the acidity in it is gonna be the pH is a little bit more low. It's gonna be a little hot for their rumen. It can potentially cause some bloating. It can potentially cause some cud spilling, which is kind of like barfing up nasty green stuff. So that's important for you to remember. The last thing that I want you to do is I just want you to keep free choice sodium bicarb out there, just regular baking soda, put it in a dish, put it by their water, and they will eat it as they need it. You will be shocked at how they eat it. We will put it out there, and sometimes they'll just, if they get a lot of clover and stuff, they'll eat it like crazy. And if they don't, they won't hardly touch it at all. But we always, always, always keep free choice sodium bicarb out there. We talked about foot issues a little bit earlier. I mentioned briefly about laminitis. Laminitis is that metabolic disorder that it causes a lack of blood flow to the foot, and it causes some problems to where the hoof wall starts to come undone and things like that. A great way to help prevent against laminitis as well is by offering free choice sodium bicarb. And there was an article written by Pipestone Veterinary years ago where they talked about that. That was actually one of their main selling points for offering free choice sodium bicarb was the prevention of laminitis. So those three things: get your TheraBloat, always keep it on hand. Even if you don't use it, it is the best money you'll spend just for the insurance factor. Don't put them out hungry, and make sure that you keep free choice sodium bicarb, and you should be fine. You may have one or two animals that are more prone to bloat, but it should be under control. If you get an animal that bloats up on you to the point that you have to use your TheraBloat, you're going to have to pull them off the pasture. Chances of them getting used to it is really, really low. They may kind of fool you and you may think that they're used to it, and then they're just going to get healthy again, and they're going to go out and they're going to hit it again really hard, and you're going to find them out there dead. So if you see an animal that's down, if you see the bloat, you go ahead and you treat them and you get them off pasture and you take it from there. And it's probably a good idea to go ahead and load them up in the truck and take them to the sale barn. But that's just my opinion. So, okie dokie, what do we got here? Pertaining to genetics, do they use or ram pass more of their genes for parasite resistance? So you're going to get parasite resistance from either parent, and it's kind of a crapshoot. So we get half of our genes from mom, and we get half of our genes from dad, and so there's a lot of talk about this. They're like, oh well, you get this from mom and you get this from dad. We talk about this with twinning and tripleting a lot. They're like, oh well, the mom decides how many babies there are. And that's absolutely true. The mom does decide how many babies there are because the mom's the one that's ovulating and dropping those eggs. However, it is important if your male comes from a twin or comes from a triplet, because that male is going to be having daughters, and we need that genetic propensity to go through to those daughters. So hopefully that makes sense. Yes, it is the mom's decision. Well, not decision, but it's the mom that determines how many eggs she drops. And there's genetic propensity for that. If you get a twins and triplets, then the chances of having more twins and triplets are very high, or higher, statistically speaking, beyond a shadow of a doubt, like at least a standard deviation difference showing that this is true. So if you have it up to you, if it's your choice when it comes to multiple births, when you're interviewing this farmer, or when you're looking at buying lambs or goat kids for breeding, you want to ask them, Is this a twin? Is this a triplet? And then you want to ask about the mother. What does the mom give? It's not uncommon for first-time yearlings or doelings to have a single, so that may not be accurate for you to ask, but you want to know what the mom or the grandmother was having. That would be much more intuitive, I guess, and a better way to go about things. Now, the other thing that you want to consider is, how are they causing these animals to ovulate? you know, some of these guys, they kind of laugh, and I've had people tell me, they're like, yeah, these people keep asking me if they have twins or triplets, but I use hormones, so it doesn't really matter. And that's true. If they say, oh, well, this mom always has twins, and they say, but I also always give them a cedar and give them progesterone and HCG and all these other things that cause them to ovulate, it doesn't necessarily mean nearly as much as it does if they're doing it naturally. But again, my point is, in my long-winded rant here, is that we get half of our genetics from mom, and we get half of our genetics from dad, and so that's why we want to be very, very cautious about what animals we keep and what animals we cull. If you have a mom that you worm her and she just gets the worms right back, and you worm her and she just gets the worms right back, or she's always got coccidia and you're always having problems, you do fecals and you see all kinds of problems, you got to get rid of her, because the chances of her babies having that are extremely high. Same thing with your rams and your bucks. For goodness sakes, these animals are going to be 50% of the genetics on your farm. So if you have a buck or a ram that has these problems, you got to really do your homework. And it really stings sometimes. And I get it. It really sucks. It really sucks to buy an animal and then you bring them home and you raise them. And then you look at the books at the end of the year and you realize, like, I am always worming this animal to keep them healthy, or this animal is always like going to the sick pen, and then I get them better and then they crump on me again. Yeah, that stings a lot, but you got to ask yourself, like, is it worth it? At what point is it not worth getting rid of? And we run into this with our customers a lot. I have a friend right now that had that had coccidia really bad, and I said, you got to get rid of her, man. And he's like, oh, but I really like her. And I'm like, yeah, but to what end? If then what? If you decide to keep her, then what? Well, now you're putting your lambs at risk, and she's walking around shedding coccidia, and you have all these problems, and you're saving one life, but in doing that, you're endangering multiple more. So I get it. I don't like it either, but give yourself advice just like you would give to someone else. Like, what if this was your friend and you did not have any emotional attachment to this animal? What would your advice be to them? If your friend that you actually cared about was in your situation, what would your advice be to them? And if that advice isn't matching up to the advice you're giving yourself, then there may be emotions involved, and we may have some other issues that we need to think about. Okay. So Brian said we're going to give the straw. No problem, Brian. I didn't think that up on my own. I got that idea from somebody. Yeah, don't give me too much credit for that. So Jamie, all stock loose minerals, mostly losing hair on the sides. I would look into. I would definitely look into giving them. I would look into the multi-min 90 regardless, to be honest with you, for your goats, and then I would also look into treating them. If you're giving them a mineral, I would definitely look into treating them potentially for mange, and just go from there. Conrad, buddy, I'm so far behind you. I'm not 100% sure what you need me to type out. So if you could clarify that for me, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'm sorry about that. Just kind of let me know what you need me to tell you, and I will type it in there for you. Gabrielle, I've been told from some breeders over here that LA 200 can leave males sterile for a couple of weeks. Have you ever heard of this? So anytime that you have a animal that is sick or down, and you're stressing them out, it can lower sperm count. It can lower it can cause all kinds of problems. So if you're giving medication like antibiotics, if you're worming, if you're doing any of that, we want to keep all of that stuff out of our programs at the time of breeding as much as possible. That is absolutely true. And it's not just the LA200, it's any of these things that are going to stress their system out. So I would not advise that you worm your animals right at the time of weaning. Or pardon me, at the time of breeding. I would not advise that you give them a bunch of medications right at the time of breeding. Anything that's going to stress out their system is going to cause problems. Is there evidence that antibiotic use and things like that can have an effect on sperm count? Yep. Is there evidence that antibiotic use can have an effect on ovulation? Yep. So just do your best to avoid them. We want to get these animals as healthy as we can and then breed them. So that's the name of the game. The name of the game is get them healthy, get them where they need to be, and then breed them. That's why we flush them. We had a question that came through tonight. Someone said, "Well, when do I want to worm?" Well, the answer, the politically correct answer is well, you only worm when you need to. But the real answer is that most of the time you really want to check and worm if you need to a couple of weeks before breeding, a couple of weeks before you turn them out on pasture. What we like to do is we like to check them right before we turn them out on pasture in the spring, and then we like to check them again a couple weeks later, and then we like to check them again before we bring them back up to dry lot during the fall. Some producers will worm prior to breeding, and then they'll worm prior to breeding, they'll worm prior to lambing and kidding. That way they're not dumping that in with the kids and the lambs, and then they'll worm them again at weaning. So it depends on what works for you and what works for your farm. If you find that you're not really having an issue with worms, I would say, be as liberal as you can with it. If there's no need to worm them, then don't worm them. With that being said, if you are having an issue with worms a lot of the time, not only do you need to look at how often you're worming, but you need to look at the genetics again as well. It all comes back to genetics. Again, for those of you that weren't on at the beginning, when we're talking about genetics, I just want you to think of it as, every animal kind of has a playbook. What is their propensity? What is their likelihood of getting sick? What is their likelihood of dealing with coccidia, with worms, with all of these things? And no matter how hard you try, you're going to be stuck operating within these rules. If you have an animal that is prone to worms, you can worm them all the time. You can worm them with copper sulfate every 2 weeks, and you're going to be worming them every 2 weeks. But that's an animal that needs to go. That just because we have tools in place that we can use to get these animals healthy doesn't mean that we should keep them around, and keep them doctored up and medicated up all the time. There's really great medications out there that work for things like coccidia, the toltrazuril that we've talked about over the past couple of times with coccidia. That stuff works really, really great. But just like everything else, it has its downsides. The withdrawal period on toltrazuril is freaking awful. Like, I mean, awful. I, don't quote me on this, but I want to say it's something like 48 days that you can't eat that animal if you treat it with toltrazuril. The other thing is there is coccidia resistance, and we haven't really talked about that. We haven't got into that. I need to make a video about that. But essentially, we spend a lot of time talking about antibiotic resistance, and we spend a lot of time talking about worm resistance. There's coccidia resistance as well to some of these medications. So that's some scary stuff. So we want our animals as healthy as possible. Obviously, I think it goes without saying, we want to give the least amount of antibiotics. We want to give the least amount of wormer. We want to give the least amount of coccidia medication, and go from there. But at the same time, we have a responsibility as practicing good animal husbandry. We have a responsibility to keep our animals healthy as well. So to put yourself in a situation where you're like, I don't worm, and let your animal die from a worm load, like, that's not acceptable. So you got to try to find that happy medium. So, okay, what age can you give? Let me make sure I haven't missed anything. What age can you give lambs copper sulfate after using the white and brown wormer first? So weaning, I think is 6 weeks and thereafter. So we personally start running our trifecta method at 6 weeks or 8 weeks, depending on when we're weaning them. So usually we like to wean as soon as possible. So 6 weeks, we start with the white wormer, then we go to the clear wormer, or as you refer to the brown wormer, which is in the brown bottle, probably why you said that. So we do our white wormer, which is our valbazin. We move to our Dectomax, and then from there we move to the copper sulfate. Copper sulfate for our juveniles until they reach 75% of their adult weight. We're going to usually be giving them around 50 milliliters, and then once we start getting above that 75%, we switch it up to 100 milliliters. I've got a lot of questions recently about what are the chances of poisoning with the copper sulfate, and that's completely understandable because it's been drilled in our heads. If you give copper to these sheep, it's going to kill them. If you go to the University of Kentucky study and you check that out, in chapter 4, they actually did a study where they talked about that, and they ran the blood work. They checked the liver values. They checked the copper in the systems and things like that. And they talk about how, everything was good. Knock on wood, we haven't had any issues with it with any of our animals. And I know a lot of you are now worming with copper sulfate, and you've had great luck as well. So I just want to throw that out while it was fresh in my mind. But at weaning, we wouldn't want you to give it before weaning to them. I just don't think there's a reason that you would need to. So 6 weeks you can start, which will put you at about 8 to 10 weeks by the time you're hitting them with that. So Conrad, the pour-on for Mange. So it's Silence, Cylence. So Silence is that. Hopefully that answers your question. And you can order Silence online. It does not need a prescription. The way we apply Silence is we apply, if it's juveniles, so for the lambs or kids, we apply 5 mLs of the Silence along the back, along the spine. So we start at the back of the neck and we go down to the tail. And then for adults, we use 10 mLs. And that is what we use. So hopefully that helps you out. So, next week we're gonna be changing it up. Like I said, we got videos coming up. I really appreciate you guys watching. Check out Linessa Farms Tack Box. We'll go from there. Next week we're gonna be hitting it hard with our interviews. I'm super excited about this. We're going to be talking. We're either going to be talking to the folks from Herd Help, which is our individuals I was telling you guys about with the app, with the mobile app that they're coming out with, or we're going to be talking to Aaron Jennings next week. I'm not sure which one it's going to be, but yeah, we have tons of people lined up. We actually have people excited to come on here and talk, and it's going to be live, and you guys are going to be able to ask questions, and it's going to be awesome. So we're really excited about that. So thank you guys very much. We appreciate all of your feedback. We appreciate all of you watching our videos. If there's anything that you need, by all means, make sure you contact us. I'm going to put our email right here. It's customerservice@linessafarms.com. And you can send us an email there at any time. And again, you can go on Facebook and check out our group at Linessa Farms Tack Box. Okay. With that being said, we are going to wrap it up. I am Tim from Linessa Farm Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again, and I look forward to seeing all of you again next week. Have a great week and a great weekend. God bless.